In the spring of 2006, Italian investigators were listening to a wiretap that had nothing to do with football. They were chasing an unrelated financial case, but sitting inside months of recorded phone calls was something nobody expected. A football club executive on the line with the man in charge of assigning referees, quietly steering which official would work which match. What you're about to hear is how one club's private phone habit unraveled Italian football's biggest scandal in a generation, how it happened in the same summer Italy won the World Cup, and how, almost a decade later, every criminal charge against the men involved simply expired. Mid-2000s Serie A, Juventus is Italian football's dominant club, backed by one of the most powerful front offices in the sport, General Manager Luciano Moggi and CEO Antonio Giraudo, both widely respected, both extremely well connected. Referees in Italy aren't picked by the clubs. They're assigned by a federation committee, specifically to keep any one team from gaining influence over who officiates their games. That firewall is the entire point of the system, and it's exactly what's about to be shown, on tape, not to exist. Moggi's own path to power is part of the story. He started as a railway station master before working his way into football as a scout and agent, eventually building relationships with referees and officials across 2 decades before ever running a club. By the time he's Juventus's general manager, he's also closely tied to GEA World, a football agency co-founded by his own son, Alessandro, an agency that, at its peak, is reported to represent roughly 1/3 of all players in Serie A, creating exactly the kind of conflict of interest the referee assignment firewall was supposed to prevent everywhere else in the system. Prosecutors in Turin and Naples had been tapping the phones of several football figures for an entirely separate financial investigation, nothing to do with match outcomes. Somewhere in the routine process of transcribing hundreds of hours of unrelated calls, an officer flags a conversation between Moggi and Pierluigi Piretto, the man who effectively controlled Serie A's referee designations. They're not talking about crimes in the way anyone expected. They're talking about referees by name before games are even played. The wiretaps were never meant to catch any of this. Prosecutors had opened the case to investigate suspected fraud in player transfers and television rights deals tied to GEA World, Moggi's son's agency, a completely different kind of financial crime. It's only because those wiretaps ran for months, sweeping up every call Moggi made on the monitored lines, that the referee conversations got caught at all. Nobody was ever specifically hunting for a match-fixing scandal. They found the biggest one in a generation by accident. Over months of transcripts, a pattern emerges. Moggi allegedly discusses which referees and assistant officials he'd prefer for upcoming Juventus fixtures, and Piretto's committee appears to accommodate him with striking consistency. It isn't one bribe or one fixed scoreline. It's something arguably more damaging, a standing, informal channel of influence over who gets to make the calls, built quietly over years, city by city, phone call by phone call. The transcripts include specific named requests, Moggi asking for certain officials to be kept away from Juventus matches, and others to be assigned, tied to fixtures across an entire season. And because GEA World's reach extended into so many other clubs' rosters at the same time, investigators and rival club executives alike suspected the influence wasn't limited to Juventus alone. It's simply the club whose calls happened to be on the tapped lines. In May 2006, days before that summer's World Cup, Italian newspapers begin publishing the transcripts directly, word for word. The country reads along in real time as private phone calls between a general manager and a referee chief become the biggest story in Italian sport. The Italian press names it within days. Calciopoli, a mashup of calcio, the Italian word for football, and the poli suffix borrowed from decades of Italian corruption scandals going back to the 1990s bribery investigations known as Tangentopoli. The name sticks instantly because everyone in the country already knows exactly what kind of story it's describing. Here's the part that makes this case genuinely strange. As the scandal detonates at home, the Italian national team, stacked with players from the very clubs under investigation, flies to Germany for the 2006 World Cup. The country is furious at its football federation and euphoric about its national team, simultaneously, for the exact same 6 weeks. On July 9th, 2006, Fabio Cannavaro, Juventus' own captain, lifts the World Cup for Italy in Berlin. Within days, the club he captains is relegated to Serie B for the first time in its history. Cannavaro leaves for Real Madrid that same summer. It's one of the strangest 3-week stretches in football history, a nation celebrating its greatest sporting triumph, while its most successful domestic club is being dismantled for corruption by players who, in several cases, are the same men on both stages. Italian football's own disciplinary body, the FIGC, doesn't wait for a criminal court. In July 2006, 1 week after Italy lifts the World Cup, its sporting tribunal hands down sanctions. Juventus is stripped of its 2005 title outright and initially stripped of 2006 as well, and relegated to Serie B for the first time in the club's history, with a 30-point penalty. AC Milan, Fiorentina, Lazio and Regina are all sanctioned too, with Fiorentina and Lazio initially facing relegation as well. The appeals process is overseen by Francesco Saverio Borrelli, a judge famous in Italy for leading the clean hands corruption investigations of the 1990s, brought in specifically because of his reputation for independence. Even so, within weeks, nearly every one of the original tribunal's harshest penalties gets reduced. Then the appeals start, and the sanctions soften fast. Juventus' point penalty for the following season drops from 30 to 9. Fiorentina and Lazio have their relegations overturned and stay in Serie A with reduced point deductions instead. AC Milan's penalty drops from 30 points to 8, enough to cost them a shot at the title, but not their place in Serie A. The 2006 Scudetto, taken from Juventus, is eventually awarded to Inter Milan, the only major club never implicated. Part of the reason widely cited for the softer final penalties was economic, not just legal. Italian football's television and sponsorship deals were built heavily around the biggest clubs, and a sport still reeling from the scandal could hardly afford to gut its own biggest draws right as it tried to capitalize on a World Cup win. Critics called it proof the punishment was never really about football's integrity at all, just how much damage the league could financially absorb. Luciano Moggi is banned from football entirely. Antonio Giraudo receives a lengthy ban as well. Both resign from Juventus before the sporting tribunal even finishes its work. On paper, it looks like accountability, but there's a second track running alongside the sporting punishments, an actual criminal case charging several of the same men with sporting fraud under Italian law. On the officiating side, Paretto and his fellow referee designator Paolo Bergamo both receive lengthy bans of their own, effectively ending their careers inside Italian football's officiating structure. Several individual referees are also disciplined, though none as severely as the club executives at the center of the wiretaps. That criminal case drags on for nearly a decade, and in 2015, Italy's highest court rules that the statute of limitations on the sporting fraud charges has expired. No one is ever criminally convicted. The only punishments that ever actually stuck were the Football Federation's own sporting sanctions: points, relegation, bans from the game. Not a single criminal conviction in a court of law. Calciopoli didn't just cost Juventus a season in Serie B, it forced Italian football to rebuild how referees are assigned, adding layers of separation between clubs and officiating bodies that hadn't existed before. And it left behind an uncomfortable, very Italian footnote. The sporting punishment was real and immediate, but the criminal case, the one meant to prove an actual crime occurred, simply ran out the clock. The reforms didn't make Italian football scandal-proof. Just 5 years later, a separate match-fixing investigation known as Calcioscommesse, this one involving players allegedly betting on and fixing lower division matches, swept through the sport again, a reminder that closing one loophole rarely closes all of them. Among Juventus supporters especially, the belief that their club was punished far more harshly than others implicated in the very same wiretaps has never fully gone away. The full case file, every club sanction, every appeal, and what happened to Moggi and Giraudo afterward is linked below. If you want to know which scandal we're opening next, subscribe. There's a new file every Tuesday and Friday.